To reorder our agenda. We've got the next two items are connected, but I think they make much more sense if we discuss first of all the wider reasons around the role of public art in Auckland, and then we discuss the details. So I'm going to move that we deal with item 13 and then deal with item 12. Is there a seconder? Councillor Philippaina.
It's up to you, Chair.
Oh, it's already up there.
Yeah.
Crikey. No predetermination and bias on our part there. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Thank you for that. We're just going to get the other two people who are going to present. Just to give some frame for this is an information-only item, and we thought it was an opportune time with the new term to actually just touch base about why we actually present and get involved in public art. So this is kind of a framing thing, and we thought it would be a good opportunity to frame it in terms of the City Rail link, to try and give you a bit of an insight into why we're getting involved, why we think there's an opportunity there. We're not asking for a decision or anything. As I say, this is purely framing and to whet the appetite, I guess, in terms of how we approach public art in our city. So to assist me here today, I've got Ben Corbin. Ben Corbin is a member of the PAPA. Now, PAPA stands for our Advisory Panel for Art in Public Places, and this is our independent board of experts who advise us, provide a curatorial oversight to ensure that we are consistent with the sector and are making the appropriate decisions according to ratepayer spend, etc. So we've asked Ben along here today as a member of the panel, but also integral part of the creative studio that we've created for the City Rail link. Given this presentation raises questions, but also seeks to explain through the presentation, would ask if we can have questions at the end, if that's okay. Thank you. I'll hand over to Ben.
Right. For those blades away.
Thank you.
So today's presentation is in two parts. The first part is a general overview of public art, and the second part is an introduction to the opportunity for public art within the CRL. So, by way of introduction, what is public art? Simply art made for people in public or civic spaces. And it really covers a spectrum of creative practice, from work that is temporary, like performance or sound or moving image works, to work that is permanent and enduring, like sculpture, or work that is integrated into architecture and infrastructure. And it's got all sorts of different roles to play in defining a city. So for centuries it's been used to help people remember, from monuments to people as markers of change. If we look at Nelson's Column by Bailey and Landseer in the heart of London in Trafalgar Square, or we look at the Lincoln Memorial in the seat of democracy in Washington DC, one of the most visited public memorials in the US. Conversely, it can be memorials as records of events and places of significance. A Holocaust Memorial in Berlin by Peter Eisenman. And locally, if we look out at the Mana Whenua of Auckland and the po that represents sites of significance, this work was commissioned by Ngāti Manahiri at Tāwhanui, north of Auckland. Public art can be landmarks that attract and orientate people in public space. Anthony Gormley's Angel of the North at Gateshead, or the American sculptor Claes Oldenburg's many works, this one in Tokyo. It can be used to entertain and create atmosphere through temporary events, Jeff Koons' Puppy, or more recently, Christo's Floating Piers work on Lake Iseo in Italy, in 2016, one of the most visited and published works in global media in the last year or so. It can be used to enliven spaces and the use of them. Millennium Park in Chicago, part of a significant civic rebuilding project in the home of a number of very large works, including Anish Kapoor's Cloud Gate, which literally reflects the city of Chicago, as well as Plenz's Crown Fountain at the other end of the square, which presents a portrait of the city through the people of the city as a dynamic and engaging interactive work and public fountain. It can reflect character and desirability for residents and visitors. And if we look at some of Janet Eckelman's works in the Netherlands, or locally the Red Line work in Fort Street, which was used to re-enliven that public space. It can be used to reflect the unique culture of a place through the integration of art and architecture. If we look at Renzo Piano's work in New Caledonia, reflecting the Kanak culture both in its form as well as what it holds as a museum and gallery that presents that culture to the public. Locally, the Auckland Art Gallery plays a similar role. It's home to one of the largest public art collections in the work of over 14,000 works, and the building itself is reflective of our material culture, our craft and our flora and fauna. Public art can change the way we move, think and behave in a city, and if you look at the High Line in New York, essentially a piece of disused public infrastructure, but through the integration of art, urban design and architecture, it's become one of the most visited civic spaces in the city, a cultural destination with visitor numbers far beyond any other single gallery or museum in New York City. Similarly, the Light Path in Auckland has done a comparable job in connecting to distinct and disparate parts of the city and re-enlivening it through access. So art can contribute to many things in a city, but we can really group them into three core categories. The first is to attract people in terms of a spectacle to draw people in. Secondly, it can engage people through interaction by presenting the familiar in an unfamiliar way. And thirdly, it can orientate and celebrate by creating new landmarks. This is a work by David Shrigley, literally thumbs up. So public art is an essential part of a city's infrastructure, and if we think about infrastructure in a broader sense, there is both hard infrastructure in terms of the power, water and essential services, everything that a city needs to operate, alongside the soft infrastructure, arts, culture, events, community development and a plethora of other things, which are the things that bring a city to life. And it's those two parts working in harmony that great cities are built on. The importance of public art is also recognised globally through national and regional policies. And if we look at the Percent for Public Art program in the US, initially adopted by the city of Philadelphia in 1959, and since cities across the US, it ensures that 1% of all capital and public infrastructure projects is used to create work which reflects its place and the people of the city. So public art in the CRL, we have a rare opportunity to generate a creative expression of our own cultural identity within our underground transport system. And if you think about transport systems, they not only move people in a functional sense, but they define cities in a cultural sense. 150 years ago, London had the opportunity. Its system reflected the predominant art and architectural movements of the time, Victorian, Edwardian and later Art Deco. 110 years, Paris had the opportunity. Its system as well represented the predominant movement of the time, Art Nouveau, both in terms of station architecture as well as integrated art throughout the network. 40 years ago, Stockholm had the opportunity, and the city made the bold decision to build the largest underground public art gallery in the world, and has since commissioned a significant number of works throughout its entire network. 10 years ago, Naples had the opportunity in the redevelopment of two of its lines. It treated each station as an artwork in its own right throughout the traveller's journey. And more recently, in the last 12 months, Dusseldorf has had the opportunity and has made the decision to have no advertising within its public underground system at all, instead commissioning public work which integrates art and architecture and urban design into immersive environments which reflect the city, its geography, its people and place. So who are we and where are we going within the transport system? I mean, one of the key aspects from our perspective is as the city changes, we need to reserve what happens underneath it. There are many buildings consented within the central city alone. Most of those buildings are commercial and they reflect the identities of their commissioners, whether they're corporates, local or international. And if we don't capture and reserve the transport system as a space for expression, where there will be less and less places to do it. So the opportunity is to move out beyond large civic gestures towards an art that's integrated into the fabric of the city, reflecting the human dimension, placemaking and creating a sense of belonging. So what's the opportunity? Public art attracts people, builds community, brings people together and creates local identity. Through placemaking, arts and culture make substantial contributions to local economic development, livability and cultural industry competitiveness. Public art projects will be most effective when they're part of a larger, holistic, multidisciplinary approach to enlivening a city or a neighbourhood. And lastly, the potential for public art is not only to change the physical landscape, but the cultural climate as well. So the opportunity here is for people to see themselves in civic spaces, as well as expressing our differences to the people who visit us. So in terms of how we're going to do this, we've got a creative framework to conceive of art in the public realm, and it's made up of two parts. The first is stable elements, integrated and embedded aspects of cultural identity to create a sense of legibility. We have some standout examples in the city at the moment, including Te Oro, the recent Community and Cultural Centre in Glen Innes, which not only reflects the many cultures of that place, but also integrates art and architecture into a unified experience. Secondly, expressive elements which are landmarks and have impact and orientate the user and create a sense of memorability. The Lighthouse, a bold and iconic work that tells stories about who we are and where we come from on Auckland's waterfront. So the opportunity within the brief for the CRL is to create a unique New Zealand transport experience. If Auckland is one of the fastest growing and most culturally diverse in the cities, it won't be necessarily reflected in our commercial architecture, but we have the opportunity to do it within the CRL. Auckland is the largest Maori city in the world. It's also the largest Polynesian city in the world, and these cultures, along with many others, are a key part of what makes the city unique. We need to find ways to represent our cultures through different forms of creative practice within a contemporary context in ways that are both temporary and dynamic, as well as ways that are enduring. So in summary, what can public art do within the CRL? It can contribute to the image of a city and reflect who we are. It can help orientate and wayfind the transport system. It can create atmosphere, mood and have a positive effect on the users. And lastly, it can increase patronage across the system by creating a more desirable aesthetic experience. Lastly, creating the image of a city beyond the function of the transport system. The potential is for it to be the largest public art project in New Zealand and a powerful expression of our culture. And if we stop for a minute to think about patronage within our current cultural institutions, approximately 700,000 people a year go to the Auckland Art Gallery. The opportunity within the CRL is for up to 30 million travellers per year, and we believe the integration of public art through these stations will not only showcase our unique cultures and contribute to a positive user experience, but create a strong, legible and memorable city image. Thank you.
Very good.
I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. So this is for today. I will write down who wants to speak. Councillor Casey, Councillor Clow, Councillor, I'll let you do that. The main reason for today was to just remind people why we have and are opening up the discussion on public art in a major way, looking at the opportunities provided by the CRL before we get too far down the track, and also leading into our wider discussion about the funding for the next set of public art, but also leading into the LTP. I think we need to be approaching the LTP with an absolute clear vision that even in a funding constrained environment, we aren't going to neglect the critical issue of art in our city. And it's simply not good enough to say we've got art in art galleries, because we owe it to our communities and all our communities, our diverse communities, to give everybody the opportunity to encounter public art and art in their everyday lives. So that's the reason why we've set out to introduce this item today. So I've got Councillor Casey, Councillor Clow and Councillor Watson.
Yeah, great presentation. I was at the Rainbow Communities Advisory panel last night, and the issue of public art came up there as a means of raising the visibility of our marginal or vulnerable communities. Any plans for, now that Auckland has made the world rankings for LGBTIQ communities, to have something anywhere in the region to celebrate rainbow communities?
Through you, Madam Chair, and probably more generic response than you're wanting. But one of the key things that we've done that you'll see in the next report is actually do a stock take of what we have. Since amalgamation, we've really just been finding out what we have, who it's by, and what the stories are that are being told. Part of that process is to understand the gaps and opportunities. So, how many works do we have of a certain artist? How many Māori works? Who are the Māori works by? How many women, etc.? And what are the...
No rainbow.
And no rainbow. So yes, so part of our change in terms of direction of public art over the next few years is to identify those gaps, both geographically as well as genre and opportunity for reflecting stories and issues such as that. So yeah, it's on our horizon to actually make sure that we do capture things.
Thank you, Councillor Casey. Councillor Clow.
That was a really good presentation. Thank you. That's really good. It'd be really good for the LTP if someone pulled the figures together to see what our expenditure is. I'm dreaming if we think we're going to become a 1% city with the arts, because I can't see it happening. But
We managed
I
it
would
at
love to do
Waitakere
it.
as a 1% city.
Oh, we did at Waitakere.
And look at all the art we've got.
So it would be good if those figures were pulled together regards the CCOs and everything, just to see what sort of percentage we are. I suspect it's probably about 0.1, or 0.2 of a percent, because 8% would be about 40 million, over 40 million, and we're nowhere near that, that's for sure, when it comes to total expenditure. But and I just hope this doesn't fall flat when it goes forward regards to CRL, because that needs to be done sooner rather than later, with the consortium that's been set up, who has all the power, which is not even a CCO of ours. We are part of it, that's it. There's a challenge there.
It's no coincidence, Councillor, that we're having this presentation today. There's never anything presented that doesn't have an agenda alongside it. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thank you. Just in terms of that public art awareness, and it was mentioned in the last item, to what extent do we take account of the geographical spread of public art? So obviously it's very much city-centred focus, but actually in the suburbs there's huge numbers of people that don't come into the city. I just really like to get a sense of how we look to try and spread it around, and also how we look to consolidate on what we've got. And I think someone mentioned the notion there of doing some stock taking. I can think of some places in my ward, for instance, where there's a kind of public art in the terms of water sculpture that hasn't been working for for X number of years. Do we have the ability to A, have that geographic spread, and B, fix up the pieces of public art that exist that are essentially defunct?
Councillor, can we pick that up in the next item, because we've got the map and the discussion around OPEX in the next item. So if you're happy for us to go into detail, it's item 12, and we can actually answer the practical questions in that one. So if you're first cab off the rank when we do that item. You happy with that? Okay, Councillor Cooper.
Oh, just to say, I absolutely support this. When we did the New Lynn Trench, that was one of the things, and we took the Croatian lace-making woman who developed the glass panels and the beautiful geographic topography that's down in the trench, which has sort of really stopped graffiti because it's so bumpy, but it gets a bit grubby. That's our only issue, these things don't get clean. But I think in a lot of ways it gets a chance for communities to be involved, and you go to other countries where they have really old underground trains. It might just be the fact that that's tiles and an old sort of name in one area. Then and you look at London, where they really tarted it up for the Olympic Games, and it was just amazing. Every train station was a nice surprise. You go in there and you go, oh, this is a bit different. Wonder what it kind of makes you think about where you are, and I think it's really worthwhile, because we just don't need to provide blank canvases for graffiti as well. I think it's a good way to stop graffiti. Yeah, anyway, support that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina.
It's not a question.
Thank you, Chair. And comment, is that okay?
It's absolutely fine.
Okay, look, I'm pleased to hear the comments around this table after leading the Public Art and the Arts, Culture and Events Committee over the previous 6 years. And the reason I say that is because it's been a bumpy ride. So hearing the positive comments now, plus also having a look at what percentage we have and will be putting into public art through you, Chair, is awesome to hear. So I look forward to the continued support of public art, especially in relation to the CRL, but I think in relation to the region as well. So thank you, Chair, and also, again, just want to say thank you to our staff that are here.
Thank you. Would you like to move the recommendation,
Yes,
Councillor
please.
Filipaina? That's good. I'm happy to second that. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And thank you. That's a fantastic kind of opener. Starter for 10 as we then go into the practical capital arts program now, but it's certainly an issue that we're going to pick up on an ongoing basis. So thank you. Awesome
Thank you.
presentation. So same team, next topic. Thanks, Ben. That was great.
I do apologise, I've had 3 agendas in a row. This must be getting boring for you now.
No, it's great. Love it.
Okay, so this is the Rubber Hits the Road report, outlining our public art work program for the next 12 months. I'll take the report as read, but I just will pick up on some of that geographic spread stuff. As I say, we are making a shift in the public art in terms of understanding what our portfolio is and where we're investing money. We've got some key drivers that are pulled out in the report as well, particularly around opportunities for partnership. Public art does cost money. It should be invested in. It's not it's a here and now expense, but actually it's an expense that plays out over 100 years, sometimes more for those really precious works. So therefore, part of driving our program is to look at opportunities for partnerships with the philanthropic sector, partnerships within council and other developments, as well as private development. So we're trying to really look for those opportunities and get the best bang for our buck. Also, another key theme is less projects of a slightly bigger scale with more impact, to have some real key visible projects that identify Auckland as being unique. We don't want to leave a legacy in 100 years' time of Auckland. It's similar to Melbourne, or it's similar to Sydney. We want somewhere that people go, they can have a mental image of what Auckland looks like, and part of that identity is through the public art. Yes, there is a concentration in terms of downtown works. I think there are a lot of opportunities for partnerships and visibility downtown, also for larger expenditure. But there are also some gaps across the region, so we're just trying to balance that across. In the appendix there, Appendix B, we've got a geographical spread of the projects. So the green ones are the projects that we're actually building across the local board areas. The yellows are in design phase at the moment, and we've got a small section of scoping works, which are the blue dots, which go quite far north and quite far south. So it is trying to balance those that geographic spread, but we do start off with an inequitable platform that we're trying to address.
Okay. Is that, you're
Yeah,
comfortable with that,
that
Councillor?
answered that part of the question. Thank you, Richard. The other part of the question was to do with existing public art that is, in a poor state of disrepair or in some cases not working at all.
Yep.
And obviously there's a capital expenditure required to bring that up to scratch, but it's just a very bad look when at some point in time a lot of money has been invested in some sort of work, and it's a public space, often one of the busiest places of where people congregate, and it's just derelict.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think at the front end we've got to get better in terms of making art that lasts and art that is robust and can withstand the environment. Some of the artworks that have been created in the past 30 years didn't anticipate what the environment is like nowadays, particularly around things like glass, and the prevalence of etching into glass and graffiti and vandalism, etc. We do, however, have an annual budget for both renewals and OPEX. So often it's just a matter of identifying what's out there and what the issues are, and we report them through to our asset management and response team, and they should be able to address. We don't think that there's a particular pressure on those budgets, so it's just really us understanding and knowing what's out there. A second part of this is we will move into, in the next few years, looking at the lifespan of projects and say, identifying how long they are going to stay on this earth before we decommission and retire them, because there are some that do need to be retired, but it's currently just sitting there not looking great. And it's about being upfront at the beginning of a project to say, hey, this project's going to last 20 years. At the end of 20 years, we're going to remove it. We don't want to fast forward 100 years and just keep generating projects and then just having littered legacy everywhere. So it is about that true asset management.
I think it's a really good question, Councillor. I know we had a fountain out west that we suddenly discovered we were spending $12,000 a year cleaning, and despite the fact that it upset people hugely, we just actually closed the fountain, filled it in, did something different. And I think some of those are the hard decisions. There is some artwork that may have been lovely in the 70s, but really time to move on. So those are the tough decisions we're going to have to make. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Just one, I've got an observation first. B10 you've got somewhere in the southern hinterlands. When I lived in Waterview, it was closer up to B5. Isn't Heron Park in Waterview?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Kathy, it is, isn't it? So that needs to move up by B5, just in case you're showing somebody this again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess for me, one of the things you made a comment before about our Pacific community, yes, but our fastest growing community is our Asian community. So I think that's very important in the inner city as well. Yes, we consider the island nations as ours, so to speak, because we're colonising them, but our Asian community is absolutely huge. So the other one was just in terms of, there was the faux walk pathway that you've got in here, but it's not in our LTP going forward, which I hope it is. I'm foreshadowing that, because the faux cycleway, there's nothing in the LTP, but you've got it here. So I'm hoping that's foreshadowing that it's going to be there, because we're no good doing art if we haven't got it in there. And the other one was in terms of, sometimes we have partnerships in the motorway corridors, and we did such a partnership with NZTA up round Westgate, and there's these orange things, and they're absolutely disgusting now. They're fantastic, but I don't know who's maintaining them, because I don't know whether there was a partnership that we had to maintain them or not, but they're absolutely awful. And please, can we just find out somebody to sort it out, because everyone hated them except a few of us. But I hate to see it just, yeah. So if we're going to do art, we've also got to maintain it. So that was really it. But I mean, I agree with thing, and I just support Councillor Watson, because when I look at 25% of the growth is in the northwest, and we've got one thing going on at the library, and even though there's been a lot of private development, we really need to be looking at that, because that's going to be a huge catchment, and I'd hate to see that sort of bereft. Thank you.
Through the Chair, just a couple of points there. The Northwest, and one of the partnerships things I was talking about before, we want to get bang for buck. So what we're developing is public art strategies for those transform, unlock projects, so largely Panuku based. So whilst they might not be represented here, there will be a strategy for those.
There's no transform unlock in the Northwest, it's in Henderson, but it's got a lot of art.
Yeah.
But,
Okay. So that might be a reason for the 1% discussion in the LTP.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm interested in your approach to private philanthropists who may want to support public art. And I just wondered how you're going about that. Reason being, I think if someone could give me a list of public art locations and potentially what it would cost to put stuff there, I'd like to help you work with that. To the extent that we could maximise the ratepayer investment and do a bit of both with some acknowledgement. But I haven't yet seen a kind of a list of where, as a region, we think the art should go and the opportunities, and therefore how are we going out to communities to say, look, we'd like to put something here, well, you know, we've got a small budget, but if there anyone who wants to make an investment in a local community in this place, please contact us. I just don't see that as a obvious work stream, and I think it should be. So how can we do that better?
Through you, Madam Chair, we've initiated conversations with Louise Mason's team because we do think that going forward, we hope that the debate is not whether money should be spent on public art, but the debate should be about how we pay for it. And partnerships has to be included in that. So we've started a conversation, particularly around the opportunity of the CRL and going forward, how are we going to deal with this and get the best bang for buck for the ratepayers? And it's going to be through partnerships. And so we're trying to identify those key opportunities and advance a sort of a process through Louise Mason's team.
Right, okay. I think it's a real opportunity because Auckland loves to invest in it.
So just on that, on Councillor Simpson's very useful point, looking at the budget, we've got year, 18 and then through to year 20. Is part of the discussion that could be had looking for partnerships to help fund some of these pieces of art?
Through you, Madam Chair, the actual list that's there is fully funded and within our budget envelope at this point in time. So no, there hasn't been anything other than the CCO sort of joint thing. So there are no gaps presented in what's here at the moment. That's not to say there aren't opportunities.
But there might be opportunities.
Yeah, supplementary is that if that funding can be funded elsewhere, you potentially have
Exactly.
more art availability or
Exactly.
savings depending on what you want to do. I'd be keen to actually for more art, to be honest, but
Yep.
yeah.
I think that's a really useful discussion, again, going into the LTP, because there may be some of these on the shopping list that someone else will pay for, which would then move us sideways and saying we could do something else. So I think we need to keep that conversation live. That's really useful. Member Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree, it was a great report. I really appreciate that. A couple of things. In the context of identity, with respect to the 200 ethnicities that make up our city, it's a bit of a really challenging one to swallow insofar as Māori. It wakes up every day knowing they're Māori, and so the uniqueness of their identity with respect to the world looking in has us defined as that unique identity. And I don't want to let go of that because we have that dual responsibility here at the table. When the councils first came together in late 2009, there were a range of public arts Māori that were out in the field, and we learnt very quickly that very few were insured insofar as the damage that they were exposed to. I just wanted an update, if not some assurance, that that matter's been dealt with in the current status moving forward.
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, I think what you touched on is the po whenua that were around and falling into disrepair. I think we have incorporated them into our asset base. So, and this links to the Northwest Orange board. So they're not an asset in our asset register. So they're sitting on NZTA. So they will respond to that maintenance of them. The po whenua originally weren't in our public art database, but they are now, and we have a response to the po whenua in terms of maintenance and repair and stuff. Obviously, that required a little bit of work in terms of how we would normally respond. You know, we can't just send any old person out to alter po whenua. We need to go back to carvers. We need to ensure our response, and some of them will have a different service level in terms of whether it's a painted service or whether it's something that should be weathered and part of a taonga that shouldn't be touched. So we've developed a framework for that.
Just a supplementary to that, because in the context of Māori art, I don't know any Māori artist that does something for 20 years or for the duration of a project.
Yep.
When European first arrived in the Hunuas, there were 70 mature trees that were fully carved, and they're estimated to be, and this is around the 1838 period, to be at that time 300 years old. So we have a proven background on durability. I just wanted to end in there around, as I said, I don't know any Māori or even any Pacific Island artist that has an appetite for a 20-year duration or whatever, you know, it's a very enduring engagement. So thank you.
Thank you. A good reminder. Same for the Greek and the Egyptian sonnets that, you know, some people don't do things in a 20-year project lifetime. I've got Councillor Casey, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Clow, Councillor Philippina. No?
I've
Councillor
got two
Casey.
quick questions directed for anybody to answer. The first is about the Mount Albert Town Centre work, which is already, it's not even off the page yet. There's already been controversy about the Tanny Myers Park having stolen the money, which you've sorted, and of course it never appears, the correction never appears. But just on that, when a work is for a town centre, how do you make sure that there is a link between the actual content of the work and the place, Mount Albert? So that's my first question. I can give me the second one as well, if you like.
Can I answer the first one?
Yep.
Just to respond to that, I think we're getting better, and part of it is that the town strategy that we were just talking about before. So before we do a redevelopment, we'll actually get a framework for public art. The Mount Albert was one of those situations where we were bowling forward for our opportunity and then discovered that actually someone else was occupying that space at the same time, and it didn't make sense to put public art on top of a mana whenua story. It was just cluttered and confusing. So the response to that is we're trying to back away and actually start the conversations earlier in the project so we don't get to that situation. So I think it's around making sure that we, in the initial framing, we're really clear about what the opportunity is and who we need to talk to.
Thanks for that. The second question was just about ugly infrastructure. You mentioned in your table about public infrastructure, but you don't mention utility boxes and water towers. And as you know, Paul Walsh's dog at the top of Big King is now attracting people to come visit. So how do they get on your radar to beautify the ugliness around our city that the utility companies plonk?
Through the chair, I think we do acknowledge that there is a part and a focus for communities in terms of beautification. It's not always what we would consider public art. Now, we're not trying to be snobby. We're just trying
Yes,
to have
you are.
Yes, a little bit we are. But this is about trying to create a workable program. So we've got a lot of projects that we're working on. Generally, the utility boxes we do consider beautification, and often a local board will respond to those utility boxes, such as Oraki, who's just entering into a project to beautify their utility boxes. But we try and keep it away from the regional project because it's quite a small expenditure, and it's often a local response.
Okay. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you. Mine's kind of a supplementary to both Councillor Simpson's and Councillor Casey. When it comes to public art and the decision-making that you're seeking from us now, it's around the governance and the roles and the responsibilities of the local boards vis-a-vis those of the governing body. Because art does, public art particularly, does tend to attract sometimes differing views. And if we are going to, in commissioning public art for the future, look at the issues of durability and suitability, all of these sorts of things, and especially if we're going out into the marketplace for partnerships in a philanthropic sense, which we've discussed in the past, Richard, how do you see this vexed issue of decision-making and governance being played out? We've got a working party looking at governance at the moment, and I think that perhaps this is a piece of work that should actually be through Phil Wilson, given consideration, because it's not to diminish the role of local boards in any way, shape or form, but there has to be some sort of regional overview and decision making. So I'd just welcome your thoughts on that.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think you've touched on a really big issue, and we struggle with it ourselves in terms of, we have to remind ourselves we're not the taste police, because we all have...
Oh, really?
I know. And we all have opinions when we see concepts come through, and there'll be, 70% of the office think that's amazing, and then there'll be 30% who think, that doesn't speak to me. So it is a really hard thing that we struggle through, and I know that governance has the same issue, because you do want to say what your opinion is. So we've got to, I guess our role as officers is to provide the framework and the structure for making decisions based on what is controllable in terms of an asset for the city and the public purse, etc. But we've just got to engender a certain amount of trust and confidence in the curatorial decisions, which is why we formed the advisory panel to sort of check our thinking with a sector, to try and make sure that we aren't going down too much of a rabbit hole that we've created in isolation. So I guess what we've got to work out is what we are actually seeking. Are we seeking a rubber stamping, or are we seeking an infrastructure imbalance? So I guess it's about the information that you're presented with as governance, and our focus will be to try and keep you informed all the way along the line. So like we've done today, to just signal that we've got a real interest in CRL, to keep you on that information journey, and our next comms plan with CRL will involve elected member presentations on the detail. So I guess it's us to understand where that balance lies about information and what we're actually asking. I think it's going to be around the geographic spread, the durability, and the coverage of issues, to see are we actually presenting something that responds to our unique Māori identity, but also the demographics of our community that we live in.
Madam Chair, I think this is where our governance responsibility needs to step in, and that we need to be quite clear about our expectations here, because I don't think the staff should be put in the firing line in between perhaps some of, if I look back historically, some of the difficulties that we've experienced in the past. So our brief in terms of giving decision making needs to be, I think, more explicit going forward.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to raise, Councillor Fletcher, and I think we need to have an ongoing discussion about the governance of this critical but often vexed issue. And going back to Councillor Simpson's point, if we are going to look for benefactors, patrons and funders, we actually have to be nice to them. And we have a very recent example of where we almost lost the support of an exceedingly important arts patron and very generous company who gave something extraordinary to the city, and we were not exactly the easiest to deal with over there.
Including Barfoot and Thompson's own staff.
Councillor, I don't think that was necessary. I think we owe them a huge debt of gratitude for the most extraordinarily generous, beautiful gift to the city that's now very quickly a loved and iconic piece of art. I'll move on to Councillor Clow. Loved and iconic artwork that you are.
Thank you. Richard, thank you. This is public, a large public art outside, or sculptural generally. When are you coming back with something on our other public art, which is hanging in buildings? You've got a really good fix on things now, because the reason I say that is we've got a lot of art that is hidden to a degree, and I'll just give you an example out at Waitakere, out at the old, at the Henderson Payment Centre there. There are a couple of Anne Robinson glass pieces, which were the most expensive pieces that Waitakere valued, and they're sitting next to a service elevator with a bank of pamphlets right next to them. Yeah. And to be quite honest, it's just a crying shame. They should be, really, they should be in the Mayor's foyer. I mean, they're beautiful pieces of work, very valuable, and they're sitting in the most inappropriate place. Now, there's quite a few examples like that around the city that we're just sort of not getting a good fix on. Yep. Maybe where they are and where they should go. But that's just a classic example. So, and that is public art. I mean, obviously it's got to be inside and protected and that, but...
Just to respond to that.
Yeah, I think we need to pick that up. I rescued an Anne Robinson bowl sitting on top of a filing cabinet in the faux local board office. I nearly fainted. This is a $30,000 glass bowl that someone was using to put business cards in, you know? So I think, thank God, the inventory is being done because people just don't know what they don't know. And for those of us who've promoted, supported and protected our arts investment and the arts community for a long time, that kind of makes my hands go sweaty and me actually get quite grumpy. So thank you for the inventory that's been done and the serious OPEX that's now being attributed to that.
Because the two flowers that I were talking to, they're worth 40,000 each, I think, as well.
Just through you, Madam Chair, to respond to that, I did have a similar hernia when I walked into that office. That is the indoor collection, so that's not part of the public art assets, it's part of our indoor asset collection. Unfortunately, that budget was removed and no longer exists in terms of the indoor collection, so we haven't spent a lot of time to respond and do that. It was given up for savings 2 years ago.
Yep, we note that. Anyway, let's get back to something positive. We've got a really good CapEx project
Sorry,
here.
Chair, but are we noting that therefore, you know, something to
We
be
are.
addressed in the LTP? Because we just got millions of dollars worth of
Yep.
public
Well
indoor
noted.
art that is just hanging around.
Councillor, prepare yourself for the onslaught from the Environment and Community Committee, who are putting together a very strong, well-structured and clear set of presentations to the LTP committee. We're gearing up, so, and that's on there. So I'm very happy to move the recommendations as they are. Councillor, it's going down.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Can I just really acknowledge the committee? These last two items have potentially been very difficult and divisive. I just want to really thank you for your attention to detail on this, because it is going to be a critical discussion going into the LTP where we are competing against everything else, but art and public art is actually the heartbeat of the city, and I think listening to the conversations now, it gives me enormous hope that we will follow this through. So thank you to our team for bringing this together.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your work. We've got one, the next item, item 14, is our information report, and because this was a short agenda, we've got one last item that we're going to deal with, which is, I'm just looking for, where are our stormwater guys? Are they here? Presentation on water. Oh, we're not. Okay, just to explain to people what we're doing, we're not going to do it now, it's part. We've got our clean water submission package here, which we're just going to deal with as an information item, but as part of our workshop tomorrow, we're actually going to go into a lot of detail, or quite a bit more detail, on clean water, healthy waters and stormwater. So we're going to take some of these issues that appear to be vital and just tucked away in the for information only item and deal with them in workshops. So just to draw your attention to that. And the forward work program is there, if anyone has got any questions or comments on that.
Just a question, if I may. So is everything
It's
on
something.
track? I can see that it's what quarter you're up to, but is there anything that we have fallen behind, I suppose is my question.
Do you want to comment? I think we're pretty much, as far as I understand, we are
Just a yes or no will do.
tracking. We're
All
fine. We're all
That's all.
good.
That's good.
Busy but good.
That's good.
And I'm happy to move the information report.
I'll second that.
Someone second, thanks councillor Simpson. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Phew. So we aimed to finish so that we could have our workshop starting at 11:30. This is the workshop on the future of golf and golf infrastructure, which I know has a lot of interest. So we'll take a quick 10-minute break and then we will go into the workshop. So I'll declare the meeting closed, but I do hope that people stay for this critical workshop. Thank you all, and thank you for the excellent attention to business today.